Davis 4-3 in the win. Oh, it's good!
Crosby in on goal, backhander, he scores!
And good! 49ers win it!
Hello, Loki Legion. How are we doing today? I hope we're doing pretty good right now. I understand right now it's a little bit cold everywhere. It seems throughout the whole United States. So make sure to stay indoors. Don't go outside unless you absolutely need to, just because even where I live, it's actually kind of snowing. So that's pretty cool, even if I live in California. But also, before I really get into like the meat and potato of this video, I want to thank you guys for 100 subscribers. That's pretty cool for me. That means a lot to me, and hope we can get to 1,000 even faster than we got to 100. I doubt that, but it was really cool to see that I hit 100, and we'll grow more together. So all right, so what's this video about? Basically, the MLB had like a ton of new rule changes, and I know I haven't talked about baseball at length on this channel just because there's so much stuff that happened with the NFL, and then the NBA had like the trade deadline, which was absolutely insane. But since the NFL is on the off season right now, and the NBA is kind of coming out of the All-Star break, I have a chance to talk about baseball. I love baseball, but I don't have as much opportunity to watch it just because my team, which would be the Los Angeles Dodgers, are on the Spectrum kind of subscription deal, so they're not as easy to find, especially before the postseason. But yeah, let me just kind of break down these rules for you guys. So the point of these rules are really just to increase offensive production, bring more excitement to baseball. A fun fact for you guys: batters have hit a collective 243 batting average, which is the lowest since 1968. Yeah, needless to say, that's quite a while ago. So we really have seen record low offensive productions. The MLB needs hits, it needs home runs, it needs excitement, because we all know that football, basketball are much more popular in the States especially, so it needs to do what it can to survive. So far, I'm liking the majority of these MLB changes. I like the YouTube games, they get free games. The Apple TV games also are pretty nice. It's not perfect exactly. There probably should be like a true MLB, no blackouts, no kind of region locks or whatever they do, because a lot of the times for these subscription programs for direct leagues, it never really works as well as it should. But it's a good start. But the first rule I want to talk about would just be the pitching clock rule, which basically means there's a 30-second I guess little timeout between each batter. There's going to be 15 seconds for a pitcher and batter to get ready. If the batter is not set, I believe, on like the 8th second mark or whatever, or if he just violates the thing entirely, they basically get a strike. And then, of course, if a pitcher takes too long, they haven't done the motion for a pitch, they get an automatic ball going against them. It's 15 seconds when no one's on base, 20 seconds when runners are on base. As I mentioned before, there are violations, basically a ball and a strike, respectively. So, I'm going to talk about this rule before I get on to the next one. I think this is a great rule just because we all know how long baseball games take. If you get there, you know it's going to be at least 3 hours. It's been, these are the longest baseball games in history. I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the video. But basically, every baseball game's nearly 3 hours in the last couple of years alone. And it's the longest it's ever been. So it's just so time consuming. And there's 160 games, 3 hours each. That's, needless to say, that's almost 500 hours of games just per one team. So I'm not even including other teams that play as well. So you have to really take into account these games take a long time, and that's why people tune out, or they only watch like a little bit, just because they might only want to see the bottom of the nine for if it's a close game at all. If it's not close, why would they bother watching? Especially after a certain point, you kind of know what's going to happen, even if a team's not up too big. If it's slow pace and there's not too much production from the other team to come back, it just kind of creates a boring product. And that's why baseball has had to struggle with younger audiences who don't have the best attention span in comparison like football and basketball, which are obviously a lot more action packed per play, while baseball has to be a little bit more tedious. It's a little bit more the word I would be looking for would just be monotonous. It's a slow grind. It's a battle on each pitch rather than scoring like almost on every other play, like how something basketball is, or how football is so much more dynamic than it used to be. So that's the reason why they wanted this pitch clock, just because obviously pitchers can't take their sweet time, and then batters also can't take their sweet time and stall either. So I think it's a really good rule for the game, just because I understand baseball has been around for a lot longer than some of these other sports have, especially here in the States, but we need to change so it actually be able to compete with the other sports coming out and their rule changes. It brings a lot more attention just because batters can't take forever to decide which pitch they want to throw. I mean, pitchers can't take forever for which pitch they want to throw. Batters can't take forever on trying to watch how they want to hit it. It has to be a lot more impulsive, dynamic. I think it'll bring a lot more hits. I'll bring a lot more clutch moments. We'll really get to see how these players react in these pressure moments. So that's really interesting to see. I like this rule a lot just because it brings pace to the game, and that's what baseball really needed. Next rule would be the pickoff rules, which basically means if they try to get the same runner out 3 times, if they're if they're not picked off within 3 times of trying to get them, basically they go to first base or the next base automatically. So let's just say there's a runner on first base, and then they try to get him out 3 times when he's trying to steal. Basically, if they don't get him out when those 3 times, he goes to second base. This rule is pretty interesting just because it's the same thing. They want to see more stolen bases. It's like record low how good they are at picking off runners. They want to see more bases. They want to have more momentum, more obviously more offensive production as well. So a lot of these rules are really for. They want offenses to do a lot more so they can have more highlights, so they can advertise it more on social media because, like it or not, sports is mainly on social media now. If basketball and football are mainly you'll see every highlight the second it comes out. Baseball wants to do a little bit more of that. So if they have more stolen bases, especially of stars, and also more hits, more home runs, that helps them spread their product, especially on like highlight heaven. If he does that kind of stuff, Bleacher Report, that kind of just House of Highlights as well. So next rule would just be a team has 5 mound visits with an extra one in the 9th inning. So that basically means the manager standards go in every time now. There's only 5 per game, unless it's the 9th inning. You get an extra one, obviously, because it's going to be a little bit more tension-wise because it's the 9th inning. That's when it's do or die, especially if it's in a close game. Pretty alright rule, but I think the next rule is a lot more important, and that's going to be the infields cannot switch sides, and there needs to be 4 players in the infield. So what does that mean exactly? Especially for more casual fans, if you haven't kept up with baseball in a while, it sounds kind of confusing, but it basically means in the infield there always needs to be 4 players, and those players you cannot switch your like a left fielder to on the right side if you know a batter loves to hit on the right. So that means whatever you have is going to be there. You can't just switch over to counter whatever the batter's tendencies, because especially this year when I did watch baseball, there were so many line drives and hits that normally would have been at least a single before, but because of how defense has been playing, it literally is just a strikeout ground ball. And obviously, less runs. It's the same thing I keep repeating. Less runs, less momentum, less fun for audiences and fans. So they want to eliminate that. So we're going to be getting a lot more offensive production through that. Next rule is base sizes will go from 15 inches to 18 inches. It's obviously same thing with the other ones. Help out the offenses, help out getting stolen bases, but it's also because it helps with safety. There was a minor league thing, and it helped reduce injuries by 13% or so. So it does help with injuries, because I know there's been some nasty collisions, especially trying to on a really close one, really close calls against fast runners. That's how it goes. So helping reduce injuries, helping the batters, the runners get to those bases, obviously is not a bad idea either. This rule is, I want to talk more about how I feel about it after I tell you, of course. This rule basically means position players can only pitch when up or down 10 or more runs. So basically, before, if a game was like in the last couple innings and the other team was up like 5 or 6 or whatever, I believe that's what it was, 5 or more runs. Basically, now a lot of teams are a lot more wary of using their bullpen and their relievers more. So what happens is they'll use just like a random position player, like a backup player, and then just kind of grind out the last few innings. Nothing really crazy happens. They'd rather just use them rather than the arms of more valuable players, especially relievers in today's game. But so the MLB had a couple problems with this, just because they wanted to avoid stat padding, which basically means because there were some times where a position player, when they're up like 7 runs or 8 runs or whatever, then the other team would start getting homers, or they start getting a lot more production, getting their averages up. And obviously, those are, I guess you can say, stat padding or fake numbers, just because they hit them off a position player when they were down so big, and then that comes in a play later when free agency hits, when arbitration hits, where they'll say, hey, I hit this average, even though the average could have been up just because they were hitting on position players instead of actual relievers and normal starting pitchers. So obviously there's that, because we've known for a while that there's been a lot of kind of weird stuff going on with owners reportedly driving down the prices of players or driving down the value for GM so they don't have to pay as much out of pocket. But I don't like this one, just because position players pitching is so fun to watch, and watching the highlights of them, even if they're up only by like 5 or 6 or whatever, having them pitch is really fun, especially for some older guys who've never pitched before. It's just a really easy way to get some highlights, easy way to get some views. Cause I understand these two were up like a lot more than like 5 or 6 or 7, kind of like that weird amount where you're up big but like up double digits. But like Pujols and Molina from the Cardinals pitching last year was really fun, especially Pujols. They were up so big, so it was really fun seeing some of these players in their last years, of course, pitching, even though they're not pitchers at all. So I don't think you need more than 10 or more runs to put in position players, in my opinion. I think that's kind of just arbitrary, just because they just don't want to pay the players. That's kind of a big part of it. They don't want to have kind of fake numbers going on, but still 10 or more, that's a lot. And then with how productive bullpens are and how much teams rely on them now more than ever, with how early to take out pitchers, having being up big, like by like 7 runs or so, is really good, so you don't have to use up those pitchers as much, of course. But that's kind of how I feel about the rule. I'm not the biggest fan of that rule. Next rule is the ghost runner, which is basically, it's brought back. It's going to be for the regular season. It was there during the COVID season, but now it's going to be a permanent thing. So let's talk about it. Basically, every extra inning will have a runner on second. You start it off, so that means when you start the inning on like the 10th inning, you'll have someone on second automatically. It's more offense, of course, but I believe this can also help shorten games. As I mentioned before, games are averaging 3 hours and 11 minutes last year. The year before, actually, last year in 22 was 3 hours 4 minutes. But I need, for this ghost runner rule, I need to see it in action, honestly, just because we have the pitch clock rule, we have we have bigger bases, we have pickoff rules. So we're gonna have so many new variables, so many new kind of rules to play around with to see as an audience. And this rule, I have no idea how it's gonna play out with pitch clocks now, especially in the big league. So we have to see how this rule plays in practice before I can make a real assessment out of it, just because I can see the pros and cons. Pros, obviously, more hits, more offense, of course, but then cons would just be, I feel on second that's that's such a big advantage for offense, and it literally just one line drive, and if you make one stop, one line drive, it automatically ends. Probably helps shorten the games, but then honestly, it can create even longer games if pitchers obviously take as much time as they can, and then it still doesn't matter. Because I believe last time, even on the second base, the offenses didn't do too much of a difference. So I'm not sure how much this rule will play, but obviously we have the new rule, so we have to see how it interacts with these other rules. But I can also imagine, because of the runner in second, it can also really extend games, just because now you're basically, if you get one hit, you have basically a free run automatically, and then that can happen from the top to the bottom. So we'll have to see about that before I can really start making a fair evaluation. Once baseball season starts, and once I've seen this rule in action, once I've seen how it plays out, I'll probably make a follow-up video to see about this rule. Right now, I'm kind of iffy on it, just because I really don't know how it's going to be. But yeah, going back to what I was saying before, these rules are really meant for a younger audience, kind of like myself, who are mostly on their phones, who mostly follow sports through social media, through highlights, through Twitter posts, through players themselves, rather than watching full games. And obviously that has its pros and cons. I'll probably make a basketball video actually based on load management and based on how that's changed a lot. But for baseball, I think it's going to be better, just because baseball's not had these big changes in a very long while. And so I think it's going to matter, just because we've known baseball this audience, a lot of the viewership has gone down, and having more hits, more fun, really, just more of offense, more stolen bases, all that kind of stuff is gonna matter. It's because it's not like right now it's already saturated and they're gonna saturate it more, kind of how the NBA does with scoring rules and how easy it is to get free throws as especially as like a star player or an offensively based player. But like when the batting average is not even 25, dude, that I think we really were due for some new changes. It's because there's so many reports and allegations that especially pitchers have stuff that's basically illegal, to have a lot of kind of sticky stuff, a lot of stuff that's really hard to detect, and that's why their spin rate is so high. We have so many analytics where it's now so much about spin rate more than even just the miles per hour on a pitch. So we've had so many developments in pitching and stopping runs, rather than before, where at least in the 90s it was a steroid era, every batter was going crazy. Now it's more so, I guess, a pitcher's turn to kind of abuse some leniency on the MLB drug policy and kind of getting away with it. So I'm glad to see we have a little bit more rules to kind of go the batter's way, just because at the end of the day, people want to see hits, home runs, they want to see highlights, they want to see how that plays in a game, just because especially if you go pay for a game. I went to a Dodger game last season, and the first couple innings, it's kind of boring. It was boring just because it was a very tight game. There was no real runs. There was only like a couple really big hits, and then when you see that happen, it's like you paid money for that, and you're not really seeing too much action. You're not really seeing the stars go out. But then, of course, in that game I went to, it was I forgot the exact date, but I just remember it was a Mookie Betts walk-off single against the Diamondbacks. And when you see stuff like that, when you see clutch hits, that just excites you, and then it can make the whole rest of like the first 6 innings which were kind of boring. When you see something crazy clutch happen in the ninth, where also I remember that game, Kimbrel got a home run hit on him, and then of course the Dodgers were able to come back at the end. But for me, it was really fun because even if the first 5 innings were really slow, there was only one. There was a triple hit by Will Smith that game. But other than that, it was like, okay, it's really grindy, really defensive. But if we got to see more hits, especially clutch hits, like answering back the other team at the bottom, from the bottom to the top, that can really help bring more people in the stadium. Obviously, there's no problem filling up the Dodger Stadium, but I know for other teams, they don't have those same luxuries of having a sellout crowd, having a crowd that goes no matter what the team is or how it's looking. A lot of other teams, unfortunately, are not having those same attendance numbers. So obviously, they got to do what they got to do to get their numbers up, to get more fans watching, to get more fans to watch the highlights, of course. And I mostly agree with these changes, but as I mentioned before, the Ghost Runner, I'll have to see on how it works out with the other rules. I'm not a big fan of the position player change. I don't think that needs to be changed, honestly. But if you want to see more baseball content, if you want to see more stuff like this, that's not football or basketball, make sure to like, make sure to comment. This video did win the poll. So the next video I'm gonna make kind of similar to this would be an NHL viewership video. So make sure to subscribe, make sure to stay tuned for that. Also have like Ko-Fi and on my link tree below. So if you want to support the content made, please help that out, hit that up. So I'll talk to you guys later and have a nice one.